What's up, everyone? How's it going? Happy Tuesday. Hope you're all having a good week. Could you let me know, can you see and hear me all okay? Just because, as you know, I do these by myself, so it's always great to know if I sound good and if you can see Cinema 4D. Hey Sharon, how's it going? Thanks for joining. Perfect. Cool, that's good to know. So yeah, if you're new here, hi, welcome to the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel and also the Maxon channel. We now stream on the two. My name's Ellie. I'm a trainer for Maxon, and yeah, today we're going to be doing some cool stuff with gradients and glass. So I've been kind of exploring over the last few weeks, having a look at being inspired a lot by the stuff that's on Microsoft Design. So I'm sure you've all seen that, like it's really great simulations, but it has really nice lighting and texturing. So I thought I'd play around and posted a few things on Instagram, and a lot of you were asking and commenting saying, could we have a full tutorial on this stuff? So let me just show you a few of the renders. Also, hey to everyone joining. Hey to Tiago, Greg, Hannah, Mr. A4D, and Ogente. So I hope I'm saying everyone's names right there. But yeah, thanks for joining, everyone. So yeah, let me just show you a few quick renders. Let's find this one here. So this is just something I threw together, just testing out like typography and gradients and just some fun stuff inside of Cinema 4D and Redshift, which is great. So if you are new to both of those, so C4D and Redshift, then this is going to be perfect. We're not going to be diving too deep. We are going to be looking at transmission in quite a bit of detail, so creating like refraction and glass and things like that. But again, with the new standard material, it's not even new anymore. I keep calling it the new standard material. It just makes creating these types of shaders really, really simple. And then what else do I want to show? Yeah, maybe that one. Let me just have a look. So there's a couple of other renders that I put together. So something like this. Again, similar kinds of things. So we're looking at gradients, but we're also then looking at working with transmission to create that really kind of like nice looking plasticky material as well. And then we can throw in like some scratches, some smudges, and just do all that fun stuff that we like to do. So that's kind of going to be the idea. And then maybe we'll do this last one as well. So this last shot here, which again, similar kinds of things, but just create some nice looking stuff, really. That's the plan for today. And also, I know people often like to follow along. So let's just close this stuff down. I know people like to follow along. So I actually put together a few starting scenes. So in the description of YouTube, if you need it in the chat, let me know. And let me just link it in the chat now, actually, while I'm talking. Let's just copy that link. I'm just going to throw this link in the chat. You guys can have these. You can have them and download them. Let me just post that in there. Yeah, so the only thing it doesn't have, so it's like a starting scene. So it's got the lighting in. I haven't been able to share some of the stuff. So I used some Grayscale Gorilla HDR images on some of those final shots. So I can't share that stuff. However, everything else is set up for you. So the scene's set up, all the simulations done. I left the original simulation in the scene as well, but I baked it as an Alembic. So it's all cached for you, which is why they're slightly larger files. Yeah, so all the area lights are in there, all the dome lights. You can just add your HDRs, and then you could follow along and create the shaders, which is the plan for today. We're going to create all those shaders that you saw in those renders. Also, Sharon, you were wondering, will I go over bokeh on the new camera system? I can do. Yeah, that's not a problem. We can do that. All of these scenes use some depth of field as well, which is quite nice. So yeah, feel free to download those, follow along. So there's 3 different scenes. We'll see where we get to today. But yeah, the wristbands, there's like a floating cloth one, basketball cloth, but they're all like really simple. What I like about these is they're really simple simulations, and we're going to be using the shaders to make them look really great and really advanced. And that's stuff that I like to do. So yeah, I guess we can get into it. as always, if you have any questions on anything that I'm showing or anything kind of about really anything, just let me know in the chat. I'll keep an eye on it as much as I can. I've got you all here and I've got my screen here. Also, I hope you can't hear. I live next to a school and they've got a sports day going on, which if people don't know what a sports day is, it's like the end of the year, all the kids come together and they do really fun like activities and sporting events, but they're playing music and there's a guy emceeing on a mic. Unfortunately, there is nothing I can do about it. They're having a great time, so good for them. But if you can hear them, I am very sorry. I'll try and talk a little bit louder so we can cover up the emceeing that's going on. All right, cool. Also, hey to everyone who's joining. So Jermaine, Tunji, Jonathan, David, Al, Fluff, Curtis. Good to see you all. Thanks for joining. Cool. So let's just kick this off. And yeah, so the plan is what I'm going to do in each scene, I'm going to just show you the light setup. We're not necessarily going to go through it because I want to spend the time creating the shaders and really going into detail of that. So again, I was saying at the beginning, if you're new, then that's totally cool. We're going to be going through building these shaders from scratch. We're also going to look at adapting assets from the asset browser. So if you like to use those textures in there that are pre-made for you, which I'd recommend, they are very nice. I'm going to show you how we can customize those. And also you can then adapt your own textures and use these methods and these workflows as well. All right, cool. So I've got my render view going on and let's just talk a little bit about the lighting. And so the way that I lit pretty much all three of these scenes is a similar kind of way. I always tend to start with a dome light. So a dome light is going to give you some nice ambient lighting when you first sort of like get started. So we can find a dome light inside of here. And then if I just check that, we can then see it just create some nice overall lighting. And then in here, I've just added a Pro Studios Metal HDRI, again, from the GSG guys, but you can add any HDR. We even have some, if you go into the asset browser and you search HDR, you can find a whole bunch of free kind of HDRs in there. Or you can use a HDRI Haven, which I believe is now Polyhaven. Or if anyone has any other great sort of websites that they use for HDRs, then feel free to just shove them in the chat for everyone. So yeah, added my dome light to create some nice like ambient lighting. And then I tend to just add a few area lights. Area lights, the reason that I add them is one, not only to bring out some extra lighting, but I say this on a lot of my sort of like sessions or tutorials. Area lights can really help bring out detail. So if you're working with scratches, imperfections, it may be a bump or displacement, the dome light will struggle to give you a lot of like shading and a lot of that detail. So incorporating area lights alongside your dome light will really help bring out some of that detail. And so if I just come out of here, let's have a little look at the scene. Actually, I realized I didn't actually show you the scene first of all. So let's come out of here. So again, super simple scene. We literally have a floor, we have a plane, which is our cloth, and we have a sphere, which is our basketball. And it looks something like this. I can just play this through. So I cached this just so it was nice and fast. Again, you also have the cached version in your project files. So yeah, this is what we've got. This is it. And then if I just come up to my 4 views, we can see where our different area lights are. So let me just change this to my Redshift camera main. So for anyone who didn't know, we can actually be out of our main camera and back in our default camera view and move around. And then we can actually then lock the render view to be the camera that you can see in the objects manager. So this is a nice way of just kind of like moving around. And then I'm just going to switch on these 2 area lights to start with. So we have this pink area light here that's sort of at a 45-degree angle from the basketball and the camera. And these are the settings. I tend to reduce the spread a little bit. This can create some nice hard shadows, and it can also create some really nice creative lighting. So a spread, if we reduce our spread right down, so if I show you, if I reduce it right down, you'll see that we basically get like a spotlight. We get just the shape of the area light. And then by increasing it, we then still get that nice sort of intense look and create those harsh shadows, but it's slightly blurred a little bit. And then these were just recolored. So we can recolor both of our area lights by just adjusting the color. So these were the area lights that I threw on top. And then finally, the final area light is the bit that makes the difference. And so sometimes I would leave it here and I'd be like, yeah, I'm happy with it. And I think that's what I first did. I created it and I was like, yeah, this is nice enough lighting for what I want to create. But working with gobos can really bring out just a really nice finishing touch to your lighting. And so I added this third and final area light, and inside of this texture, inside the light, I've added a gobo, and a gobo is like a cookie. It goes over the top of the light and it helps block some of it. So we can create like really interesting looking designs and shapes over the top of our scene. And so if I just switch this on, it makes such a big difference, and it's such a simple technique. And so let me just switch these off, and we can even switch the dome light off if you want to, just so I can show you exactly what this is doing. So we have a big square area light over the top facing, and it's pointing down, and it's really, really low intensity. And the reason for that is I've made it quite a big size. So we can see it's like 358 by 358 centimeters. Also, side note, this isn't in real world scale. So sometimes when we create things inside of Redshift, it's sometimes better to do things in a real world scale because it makes things easier. I just wanted to create for fun, not having to think about any of these kinds of things. Yeah, so I added the gobo texture inside of here, and if I drop that down, you can see that's sort of what that looks like. And then again, you want to reduce your spread right down. And if we don't do that, we'll lose any of that nice shape that we're creating. So we'll pull that down, and then when everything's combined together, we can see we have some really, really nice looking lighting. Cool. So that's the lighting breakdown. Again, that's in the project files for you to all to have and use and break down. The only thing that isn't in there is the HDR images and the gobo, but you can just add your own to the lights that are already set up. Okay, cool. So let's actually create this shader now. So just for anyone who's joined a little bit later, this is the shader we're going to create. And it's going to be looking at adding and applying gradients, which is quite a popular topic, and it's quite a popular aesthetic at the moment. So this is going to be the starting one, and then the next one we're then going to look at glass and transmission. So we're going to create this whole thing. So let's just get rid of that. And let's just make sure I can still see you all. Okay, so let's double click, and we're going to create a brand new material. Actually, no, we're not. Let's customize an asset. Let's do that because that could be more fun. So inside the asset browser, if you hit this little box with a cloud in, it opens up the asset browser. And the asset browser is full of so many different things. And what we refer to them as capsules. So you might hear people in the Maxon world refer to capsules quite often. These are the assets. That's what we're talking about. So it could be material capsules. It could be different models. It could be objects. For example, the backdrop, that is a capsule, and you can define its width, its height, its rounding, all of those different things. So they're not just 3D objects. They're now becoming quite advanced objects that you can then use in your scenes, as well as light setups and different types of presets and node setups for you. And so if we search if I could spell, that would be really cool. So if we search fabric, let's see what kind of fabric textures we have. So I've got all the GSG stuff in here. Let's go to materials. And anything that has a little Redshift icon here has been made and created for Redshift. So we don't have to convert it. We don't have to go through that conversion process or rebuild the material ourselves. It's made as a Redshift material for us. And every month there's new ones created. So let's grab this fabric cotton. So let's just double click that and it should just load then in your material manager automatically for you. Let's go back into here and let's throw it onto our cloth. And so straight away, we're not really going to see it because it's actually white fabric. So let's just change the color first of all, and then we'll look at how we can add some gradients, add some different reflections to it, and then create those perforated holes. And then, of course, add that cool looking text and typography over the top. So if we double click our material, it's going to open up our node editor or our node graph. And if you're new to Redshift, this could look quite daunting straight away. There's a lot going on, but the way that we can kind of figure out what is happening is by coming over and just taking a look at this node here. This node is the standard material node. And when we create a material, or when we create most of our materials, this is our starting point. So it kind of starts looking a little bit like this. And so what we can do is we can use this and we can work backwards on the graph to work out what's doing what. So we can see we've got our input. So I can just pull, I've got sheen as well. So we've got our base color, we can see. So if I sort of come in here, we can see that's controlling the base color. We have some reflection weight. We have some sheen color and weight. And then we also have bump. So those are the 5 things that are being controlled on the material. And so if we sort of like come back and we follow these lines, we can see, oh, okay, cool. This is controlling the base color. We then have like a mix of colors. And if I sort of open these, we can see we then have different color corrects going on. And then we get to our base color texture. So if you see this big graph, this big chart, and it looks quite overwhelming, just work backwards to see what's doing what. But what's great about this particular material, this particular fabric, is we actually have this group at the very beginning, and the group allows us to define the size and the color. So let's just really quickly, like just for convenience, let me just change this color just so we can see everything. And then let's come out of here and let's get a lot closer. That kick in. Let's go back to auto. Cool. So this is the fabric material, this nice cotton texture. And what we're going to do, we're going to use this pre-created asset and this pre-created material, and we're going to customize it with our own gradient and then with our own sort of tweaks. And then all of a sudden it's going to become a brand new asset. So let's come back out. Here we go. Let's come out of here. And let's double click and let's take a look at how we can then start to add a gradient to this. So the way gradients work inside of Redshift is if we double click, we actually don't have anything called a gradient, which I think is what it might be called in Blender and Octane. I think they're referred to as gradients, and I think the node itself is called a gradient. So if we actually search gradient, what's funny is we don't get anything titled gradient, but we do get a ramp. And the ramp is actually the node that we need to create a gradient. So Redshift is trying to help us out here. It's trying to say, oh, okay, you're searching for a gradient. Here, use a ramp. So if I drag and drop a ramp into here, we can then, if we open up our attributes, so these little toggles here will open up your attributes manager and then your asset browser. So if you like working inside the node editor and you don't want to keep coming down here, you can do that now inside of there. Cool. So let's take a look at the ramp. So I'm just going to solo this. And so hitting this little S key is actually going to solo exactly what this node looks like and exactly how it's mapping and projecting. So let's give ourselves a slightly top view so we can get a little bit more detail. So here we can see we have a vertical gradient, a vertical black and white gradient going along the surface of our fabric. We can control the different map types. So at the moment it's set to vertical. We can set it to horizontal. We could go to maybe like a radial or a circular gradient. But let's stick to horizontal for now. And then we can use the ramp to control and recolor our gradient. So at the moment we can see we have a black and white gradient going on. It's not very interesting. So let's choose a couple of colors. Let's maybe go something like this. And then maybe let's choose like a blue. So now we've created our gradient, but at the moment it's not actually doing anything. If we unsolo the ramp, we can see that we still have that normal color, that normal pinky, sort of dusty pinky color that we just set up. So how do we have the ramp, have like this new gradient be the color of our fabric? What we need to do is we need to connect the output color to the color input inside of here. And it already has that input there for us, which is great. So if I just drag, pull out a branch and put that onto there, we can now see we have our fabric. And so you probably can't tell straight away, but if I come in closer, you should be able to see we have that original fabric that's now being recolored by our gradient. Cool. So let's make this a little bit more interesting. Let's come back into here. Let's come back into our ramp. And so I'm just having a quick look at the questions. Sharon was saying, can I open up the group so we can see what's inside it? Of course you can. So this is what's inside it. That's what's inside the group. It's just that. But what it's doing is it's controlling the scale and the diffuse color of all of these different things here. So the triplanar scale won't be having an effect because I'm not using the triplanar at the moment. So triplanar is really nice if you don't want to necessarily UV your objects, or if they haven't got very good UVs, you can use a triplanar to fix the projection. And so if I was using that triplanar, I would then use this to resize everything all together instead of having to go into the individual remaps. But again, because this is a nice, simple shape, simple plane or cloth, that I don't need to use the triplanar at all. Cool, yeah, so let's make this a little bit more interesting and see what we can do with our gradient. So first of all, let's just add some more colors. So I actually saved a preset earlier based on the colors I used for the original render. And what you can do, so let's say you've created your gradient and you like it, you can then save it as a preset. So I'm not necessarily going to do that, but once we do, we can then load the preset, and you can see here we've got some gradient presets already inside of Redshift that you can use and you can customize. And then down the bottom, you have your own set of presets. So these are all the ones that I've created. And so this is the preset that I originally used. And so, yeah, this is okay at the moment, but let's add a little bit of noise or randomization to this. And the way that we can do that is inside of the adjustment settings, we can just up the noise. And then we can see we can get quite a interesting looking abstract effect. So I actually think this is a little bit too intense. So let's pull that down. And then the frequency is the amount of noise that occurs, or how frequently that noise pattern occurs over the top. So if you find it's too intense, we can pull it down. So I can pull down this frequency to lower the intensity of the frequency. And now what we've done is we've created this cool looking, interesting gradient. So now if we sort of come back into our camera, we can see this is now what we've created. So from here, let's now get a little bit closer to that final look. So what I then did was I then created the little holes so we can create a perforated effect by using the tile shader. So back into here, we can come all the way back to our standard material. So inside of the standard material, I can already see nothing's actually controlling the opacity, which is great. If it was, then we could do some tricks to combine the two. But for this, I don't even need to. I can just create the mask or the alpha that I want, which in our case is going to be a load of little circles, and I can connect it straight into the opacity. So let's do that. Let's create that. So I'm going to double click and create a tiles shader. Again, I'm just going to solo that, and then we can see how it's projecting and how it's mapping on our cloth. So with the tile shader, we can create so many different things. Like I've been creating cloth with it. You can create really cool line patterns just by literally dropping down and looking at the different types of patterns you can create. But again, for this, let's just keep it simple. Let's just add a circles pattern. And then we need to just recolor this black and white. And this is important because we're going to be using this to control the opacity. Everything that is 100% white is going to be visible. Everything that is 100% black is going to be effectively removed. So what we can do is if we do the 100% values, we can then come down and we can control the global scale. Because at the moment, the circles and the holes are going to be huge. We want them to be nice and small. So what I need to do is I need to pull down my global scale. So let's go, what do we want to do? Let's go, I'm going to do 0.1 for now, only so it's really nice and visible over the stream, but we will actually make it a bit smaller very soon. So let's now connect that to our opacity. And now if I unsolo my tiles shader, we should now see we've created a mesh. We've created some holes, which already actually, I quite like this. I think that's quite cool. But if we want to create smaller holes or we want to have more gaps between our circles and our holes, that's where we can control the grout width. So again, we're going to re-solo this just to make it nice and easy for us to see inside the render view. And if I start to pull up this grout width, you'll notice that the white area, which effectively is the grout, is becoming bigger and the circles are becoming smaller. So let's go again, something like that. Or we could, like, let's go 0.2. And let's maybe pull this down again to 0.5. Now we've got smaller holes and we've got a larger grout area. So effectively we have a bigger gap between each of our small little holes or our circles. And then we can unsolo and then we get something that looks a little bit like this. And so in the space of 2 nodes, we've gone from what was a normal, nice looking fabric. Like we can't knock it. It was a good looking fabric. But we've been able to now make it look kind of like an entirely new style of shader. We've still got that cool fabric effect, but now we've got the little holes, like the perforated holes, I think is the technical way of saying that. And then we also have our gradient over the top. But again, we don't necessarily have to stop there. We could still take it further by applying, again, some simple techniques. So what I actually did was I wanted more reflection. I wanted a little bit more of like a glossy feel over the top of this fabric. And so instead of having to worry about going and changing the reflection settings or the sheen, we can actually just throw a glossy coating over the top. And so the way that we can do that is inside of our standard material, if we come all the way down, we have this coat option. And by default, we have a weight value of 0. And the way that weight values work in Redshift is a weight value of 0 is that particular setting is off. It's not having any effect at all. Anything above 0 is then going to have an effect up to a value of 1. 1 is 100% on. Think of it like that. So let's add a weight value of 1. Let's go crazy. Let's have some nice glossy shininess going on. And so now we have some more of a shiny coating over the top of our cloth. And I might even, you know what? I might even make these a little bit smaller. Yeah. Cool. Let's go something like that. Okay, cool. So that is the base of our material. Again, I had the holes a lot smaller, but I don't want to make them too small because I don't know if they'll be like really visible on the stream. Let's maybe go something like that. Cool. So the final step, let's just say the incremental, just in case, we never know, living on the edge. And so the final bit is adding that typography. So let's have a little look. So this was the final shot. So we're kind of close to it. We're kind of close. But the typography to me is really what makes this like an aesthetic that I really like. Like I like the style of these like crazy vibrant colors thrown in with sort of like really bold typography. And so adding text to this kind of setup is very simple because it actually doesn't involve us having to do anything with UVs. And the reason is because my cloth is just a nice, simple plane. It's a nice square plane. I can create a 1x1 tile of text and then I can just add it to my material. And I'll show you how to add it. And I won't have to worry about doing any UVing. I don't have to worry about necessarily any adjustments. And if I do want to adjust it, it's going to be really easy because it is a 1x1 tile. The cloth is that already. And that's normally what we create. So let me just show you what I created. This was like, don't judge me. I just threw some stuff together just to see what it looked like. And I'm a big fan of Nike, if you haven't guessed already. So I thought, hey, I'd grab like some of the Nike text and logos and just create like a quite a cool looking style. And I just threw the same gradient on so I could get an idea of how it was going to look. But really, this is what we're looking at. We need that transparent background. That's really important. So I put together a load of things, again, 1x1. This is going to project the map perfectly onto there. This was saved as a PNG. It's really important that it's a PNG with a transparent background because then we can split that out inside of Redshift. So yes, let me find that texture. So I think it's this one here. Let me just double click that. Yep, so here we go. This is what the PNG currently looks like. So the first way is actually by blending materials together. So this first material is my fabric gradient. I'm then going to create a second material. So let's just kick off our render view again while that loads. Okay. So I'm going to create a second material. So I'm just going to add another standard material node, and we'll just keep this one simple. What we're going to do is we're going to make it a white. Actually, no, we're not. We're going to make it a black glossy material. So all I'm going to do is change the base color to black, and then the roughness to no roughness at all. So a value of 0 is no roughness. And then we can combine these by using something called a material layer. And so a material layer, nice and simply, it's going to allow us to layer up 2 different materials. Then we can use a mask to blend between those 2 materials, similar to in Photoshop when you add a layer mask. That's basically what we're doing, but we're doing it in Redshift with nodes. So let's connect my gradient fabric holy material to the base material color. And then let's plug that back into the surface. And then we're going to plug the black glossy material into the layer 1 color. And then let's just sort of pull that. And at the moment, all we can see is the black glossy material. But don't worry, because we're going to drag and drop that text PNG that we created. If we solo that, this is what it looks like. And then we can use a color splitter node. So this is a useful workflow to know when working with this type of setup. So text PNGs, we plug that into the input and then we split out the alpha as the mask. And then now we can see we have that black gloss is our text over the top of our fabric gradient material. And what you will notice as well is it's actually following. So if I just sort of maybe come a little bit closer in here, maybe we'll go to the side actually, that will be a bit more obvious. It's following the shape of the cloth. So as the cloth begins to wrinkle, as does the typography as well. So as we sort of like come in, we can see it's going to follow this up to something like that. Now if we come in here, we can see we have this going on. But I promised you another method. So let's say that's not the one for us. Or let's say we wanted to just have like one and reposition it. Well, what we can do, we could actually come into here and we can scale this down. That may have been the wrong way. Let's go 2 by 2. So now what's happening, we're going to have a tile of 2 by 2 on here. And then we can switch off the wrapping. So what it will do now is it's only we get a smaller version. So we get that 2 by 2 tiled version, but we're not wrapping. Think of that as tiling. We're no longer tiling. So we then get a smaller version of that, which we can then begin to offset and rotate. But as I said, there's another method that we can do. So let's pull that back in there. So the secondary method is a similar kind of thing. It uses material stacking, but then if you're used to using the material tag settings as opposed to the remap settings, then this might be helpful for you. So we got a new material here, brand new, hasn't got anything in, and we're going to take the cloth and the color splitter. I'm just going to paste those in there. And what we're going to do is we're going to put our alpha again into the opacity, and then we're going to make this that black gloss. And then we can throw that over the top of here. So where did that go? There we go. And then let's just put that back actually to a 1 by 1. So now basically we're getting the same thing. So we're getting the same thing that we just created. Instead of using the material layer or material blender as another option you could use, we're using material stacking. So we've stacked the 2 materials onto the cloth or the plain object here. And then what you can do is you can come in and you can begin to resize your design this way. Again, we need to make sure that wrapping and tiling are off. And then we can start to offset this and reposition this particular text, logo, anything, design, wherever we want on the top of here. But again, the reason this was so, I would say, easy for us to do without having to UV is because we are using it on a 1x1 plain piece of fabric. So that's why this is a lot easier. But I will be talking about a UVing method possibly today as well. So really quickly, I've been really bad at not looking at the comments. So let me just have a quick look through the chat. So Fluff, you were saying, do I know why brand hex colors are not looking the same in the new node system in RS? So the first thing I would check is your color space. So let's just a little side detour in here. Yes, so color management. So by default, Redshift now uses the ACES color space, which will potentially differ from certain colors that you're seeing in other software. So what we're displaying sRGB, but in the render view, it's ACES. So to fix that, we can actually change that to like Rec 709 sRGB, and you may find you will get similar or more accurate colors. So yeah, give that a go. Hopefully that's what you were hoping for. Cool, just having a quick look. Tiago was asking about if I use a Mac. Yes, I have two different machines. I have an M1 Max MacBook Pro, which I am currently using because I have all my streaming set up on there and I have all my screen recording set up on there. And I'm about to go on holiday. So this week I'm trying to get like a lot of stuff recorded, but I also have an MSI Stealth 17 with a 4080 in, and it is incredible. It's very powerful, and the render speeds are amazing, especially when working inside of Redshift. Hey Derek, how's it going? So Mr. Effectron is in the chat. Cool. And so this is quite an interesting question. So William was saying, is there any way to see Redshift textures without having the render viewport running? Native materials show accurate textures, but RS doesn't for me. Yeah. I'm with you here. Yes. So at the moment, the viewport isn't a true representation of Redshift. That being said, from when Redshift first came into Cinema 4D, however many years ago, to now, it is a lot more accurate. So we now get reflections, we now get slightly better, not projections, but a view of what we're creating. So if we think about how much it's improved over the last year, we can kind of get hopefully a positive idea of things to come. But yeah, I'm with you there. Like, of course, we want a 100% true representation of the viewport. But again, those things do take time. Cool. Right. So yeah, so that was that first setup. We've gone there. We've created that one. So if there's any questions on that, then just let me know. So Jermaine was wondering, is there an easy way to add a vertex map to change the gradient colors? As in to animate them or make them grow? Because, so you could do that with a vertex map, or hang on, let me show you something else, which could be a faster workflow without having to do a vertex map. But yes, you can. Vertex maps are incredible ways of creating cool growths and variations and things like that. But let's let's just start off with a brand new fresh material, just to demonstrate this. Open this up. So if, Jermaine, if you're talking about changing gradient colors in a animated way, let me know if that's what you mean, because we can absolutely do that, and we can do that with Maxon noises. So recently, again, I'm really bad with remembering which version new things came in, but relatively recently, Maxon noises introduced the ability to be animated and be looped inside of Redshift. Like, yes, we could always do it inside of native C4D, but we couldn't do it inside of Redshift. But now we can. So let's create a noise. Let's create like something just standard. And then maybe we can increase the output. And let's see if we can find what's a good one. What's someone's favorite? Go on, someone let me know. Oh, that one looks pretty cool, to be fair. If someone has a favorite noise, I know you all do. We all do. Let's not pretend like we don't. Then let me know and I will change it to that one. But okay, stay with me. We have a Maxon noise now, right? So we have this sort of like gradient effect and things like that. Well, now what we can do, we can control the speed, which is the speed at which it's going to animate, and the loop period is in seconds. Okay, so Sharon says knacky. So let's go with that. Yes, we're there. Okay, cool. Yes, so we can animate this and then we can do our loop period. And so if I then play my timeline, you can see that it's going to animate. And then what if we then plug this into a ramp, said, okay, cool, let's put that as our alt input and then say, hey, why don't you control the base color? And then in our ramp, let's solo that now. In our ramp, we're going to add our gradient. So you're going to add all your cool colors that you want. Let's go with that one. See what it looks like. And we can do some tweaking. Maybe a little bit more yellow in there. Yeah. And so now what it's going to do is the noise, which is creating the pattern, is going to animate, and therefore the gradient is going to animate along with it. So yeah, what I should be able to do, I thought there was a way of seeing it animate. No, okay. Well, what we can do is if I just sort of play this through, you can see that it's then going to animate. So I'm just playing and pausing the timeline just so we can see it, because unfortunately it's not quite fast enough to be real time. But hopefully you can get the idea. And then if I unsolo that, we can now create a animated gradient this way. And you have all the control of the Maxon noise. So inside the Maxon noise is where you can do so much cool stuff. Not only is there loads of different types of noise that we can sort of like play with and mess around with to create cool gradients, we can then come in and we can adjust our cycles to create like a cool result. You can adjust your low and high clips, the brightness, the contrast. And then your ramp is literally the thing that's just creating the colors and the gradient, but all of it's done within the Maxon noise. So that could be a cool way. Or yes, what you can do is you can use vertex maps. So if you already have your vertex map set up, then what you could do is there's something called a vertex attribute node. So you come into here, drag and drop your vertex map into the attribute name. And then once you have that, you could then use that for different things. So what you could do is we could connect it to where we use the material layer or the material blender. You could blend between two different lots of gradients using like this method. And then you can use your vertex attribute as a mask between the two. So that is another method. Hopefully that answers your question. But yes, Maxon noises are so unbelievably powerful. So much cool stuff we can do with them. And yes, so Derek was saying that not all Maxon noises are loopable yet, but majority of them are. It will tell you the ones that aren't will just they won't show this. So oh god, I'm going to try and think of one now. Let me try and find one. This is where I'm not going to find one. Here we go. Cool. So wavy turbulence, for example, we can see cannot be looped yet, but most of them can. Cool. Just diving through some more of the questions. Flow. So you could use a sphere field as a vertex map and blend between the materials. Yes. Okay, you've convinced me. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. Let's just do a super fast scene. Change this to Redshift. Let's go low. Let's go 128. And let's make it a square. Let me just take this off. Okay, cool. So yeah, what we're going to do is, I mean, we don't even need to necessarily make it editable. We could have a few more segments. You can right click. So another new-ish feature is you can actually add vertex maps to parametric objects. So they no longer need to be editable, which is great. So here we go. World's most simple vertex map. Plane, not editable plane, vertex map, spherical field. Let's throw in a dome light. Let's kick off our render view and create a new material. So I'm going to show you nice and simply how we can use this vertex map to then blend between different things. So inside my material, so there's a couple of different, there's so many different methods. I'm going to show you a method that I like to use, which is using the material layer. So the material layer is basically just a optimized version of the material blender, but only allows you to blend or layer 2 materials. So if you need more than 2 materials, use the material blender. So let's do our material layer, and we've got our base color. And just for convenience, let's do a pink color and then copy and paste. And then we're going to do this kind of green, teal color. I'm going to plug that in there. Okay, cool. So it's overtaken it. But what we're going to do is we're going to we're going to blend using this vertex attribute node. So inside of here, we're going to drag and drop our vertex map. If I solo it, basically what we get is we get a black and white mask equivalent of our vertex map. And so what we can do, we can take the output color and put that into our mask. And now we're masking between those 2 colors. Again, the most simplified version of this. But then if I can move this around, it can start to move this around. So if you had an animated spherical field, if you had an animated growth, which we all love, like vertex map growths, it's just I could play with for like hours. Yeah, so that's exactly how you would do that. Let's just get rid of that. We don't need that. All right, cool. So let's get back. Let's get back to it. But yeah, keep your questions coming. If I've missed them, then feel free to just throw it in again, just so I can see it here. Also, if I do miss it, you can always add like question at the beginning in caps, so I can kind of like see it and then make sure I answer it. Okay, so let's get to this floating cloth, because I had a few, like this is the one where the tutorial idea came from. I posted this on Instagram and a lot of people were like, full tutorial, please. So first of all, we'll do the same kind of thing as we did with the first scene, but we won't go into crazy amounts of detail. But again, it is a very simple scene. We have our cloth. This time we just have 4 different pieces of fabric. In our case, they are just planes again. And then I just cloned them on top of each other. And then I added a whole bunch of different forces. So one of the most fun things I think to play with when it comes to cloth and simulation is to switch off gravity and then just go crazy with the forces. And they can be used to create really fun and interesting effects. So again, in all the project files that you have, if you've joined late, in the description of YouTube, there are some project files in there. It's basically the starting version of all the stuff that we're going through today. All of that has the original simulation in, as well as the baked or cached version. So yeah, you can go in and you can see exactly how it was made. As you can see, we have a cloth, if I can find it. We have cloth apparently in a null. I'm not really sure why I did that, but hey. Cloned, then the new thicken generator to create and add some thickness, then a subdivision surface, and then turbulence, attractor, and 2 wind effectors forces, creating this result. And this is sort of what we have. If I just play this through. So maybe it's a little bit slow because I've got quite a few things open. Yeah, this is kind of what we have. And again, let's just go back into our render view. And let's just talk through the quick lighting setup. So again, pretty much the same as before. A dome light to create ambient lighting with a HDR image. So this is what we've got here. And for this one, so even though the lighting setup looks the same, and it is very similar, but they're all, I'm always considering and thinking about not only the lighting in general, but the reflections. Because for this one, when we're going to be looking at glass and refraction and also nice glossy reflections, the lighting is going to be really, really important. So they go hand in hand, really. The lighting and the texturing goes hand in hand to create a really nice looking style frame. So we have this dome light and we have this Pro Studios metal. And so if you take a look at that, we can see that we're going to get some really nice type of reflections over the top of our cloth. And so what we can do actually is the way that I did my lighting first before I did my textures. And I actually just threw a metal material over the top. And this is going to give you a visual idea of what your reflections look like. Because as we know, metal is very shiny. So if I switch that off, we can see this is the kind of reflections and lighting we're getting from just the HDR image. And then what I did was I looked at adding some different area lights and adding reflections and colorful reflections by using area lights. Sort of similar to how we did before, but this I was considering their reflections a lot more, knowing that I was going to be creating glass. So this is the first area light. I'm going to switch that on. We can see we get this really interesting looking pattern here. And I tend to always add a target tag and then use a light target because it's like a really easy way of rotating and positioning lights without having to kind of really, really dive into the light itself. And then a secondary area light. And then a third area light. So we're getting these really nice, if I just switch off the dome light, these are reflections we created. And also shout out to Vlad, who IBC last year did a presentation on this style of lighting, which can be found on the Maxon YouTube channel. So yeah, shout out to Vlad. He also did the the current splash screen of Cinema 4D. So yeah, very, very incredible artist. A very cool guy. Yeah, so we're using the area lights to create these really cool looking reflections, which at the moment don't look like much, but when you then incorporate some glass and some cool refractions and nice glossy materials, it really starts to come together. Everything works hand in hand. Okay, cool. So let's actually create this glass material. Let's dive into some transmission as promised. So inside my node editor, to be fair, I don't even need the node editor open because we're going to start off in just the base materials for now. I'm going to switch off the diffuse color. We don't need any of that. I'm going to switch off my metalness. Also don't need any of that. What I am going to be working with in particular is reflection and transmission. Transmission is refraction, and it's how we're going to be able to create clear or see-through or transmissive or glass style type shaders. So again, we have our weight value, which, as we know, needs to be higher than a value of 0 to enable that particular parameter. So we're just going to go straight to 1. We're going to say, hey, we want transmission to be at 100%. We don't want anything else to be in play here. And so already we can see we create a transmissive material. So now the things that are controlling the look of this, if we leave our reflection and our transmission weight values as 1, the things that now are coming into play is the reflection color, the transmission color. So transmission color is the way of tinting our glass. And then we can start looking at the roughness values. So the first thing we want to do is inside of our transmission color, here is where we can choose to tint our glass. And the important thing here is the sort of lighter or darker the material is will have an impact on what your transmission looks like. So the lighter the color, the more transparent it will feel. The darker, the more like dense and solid. And so we can see that by if we go to white, so 100% white, we can see it looks like really nice and clear and see-through. As we kind of come down into the darker values, it's beginning to lose that transparency. And so when you're choosing your colors to tint your glass or any of your transmissive materials, bear that in mind. So let's go with sort of this mid light blue color. And then what we can do, so we have 2 different roughness values. We have in our reflection, we have roughness. And then we have in our transmission, we have extra roughness. And you're probably thinking, oh, roughness times 2. Well, think of them as this. The simplest way of thinking of them is the roughness in your reflection is going to blur your reflections. So we can see that we can see our reflections all along here. If I increase that, we can then see that it's blurred those reflections and therefore creates that rough surface feel and look. Pull that down. With transmission, what extra roughness does is it's blurring your refractions. So if I pull that up, oh, what are the chances of doing that? Let's just change that. We don't want 666, do we? So now what's happening is the extra roughness, you can see we're still getting the glossy reflections over the top, but it's almost created a frosted look. And that's because it's blurring the refractions. And so what we can do is we can use these 2, and when you combine the 2, it creates what we would call transmission roughness. So if I just pull this back to 0, what you'll notice is 0 is actually in the center here, and that's because we can do negative values as well. And so if I did a roughness value of 0.5, reflection roughness, and then I did a transmission extra roughness of minus 0.5, we're now still getting a frosted effect, but what it's doing is they're kind of cancelling each other out to just create a overall transmission roughness. So it's quite fun to play with these kind of settings. So what I'm actually going to do is we want some nice glossy reflections, but what we do want is we also want a little bit of extra roughness on the inside, just that nice sort of frosted effect in the middle. Okay, so from here, what we can do is we can actually then use the depth settings. So depth basically controls at what distance in scene units. And when I say scene units for Cinema 4D, it's in centimeters. So if you're in a different DCC, make sure you know what scene units your DCC is in. We're working in centimeters. And it's at what distance the transmission color is going to reach within the objects. So in our case, because we're working with quite thin cloth or thin planes, we won't necessarily be able to see it that well here. But if you had a particular object which had some slightly thinner areas, some slightly thicker areas, this depth setting can be really powerful and it can be really like fun to play with. It's also important then to know what size scale your scene is in and your objects are in. So if you're working with tiny objects and you want to use this depth setting, then make sure that you are then bearing that in mind when you are entering your values. If you're then working with really large objects, so 100 centimeters in scale or thickness, then the depth setting is going to need to be increased to warrant that. So we can even, I mean, we can show it. So if we do a 0.1, so 0, so a value of 0 is going to have the transmission color at equal depths in and across the entire object. Anything above 0 is then going to start to consider the depth value that you are using. So we've done a value of 0.1. And these are quite large. Like I think these are probably their default size, which is 400 by 400. But if I start to increase this maybe to like a value of 1, we're pretty much losing that transmission color. And that's because it's traveling so far into our object that it's just traveling through our object, and we're effectively losing then a lot of that color. But what it does do is it gives us this really nice, and in my personal opinion, more realistic glass effect, because you're seeing a more sort of like more of that transparency, but we're also still getting some of that color. Scatter color can work alongside transmission color, and it's basically the additional color that can get scattered within the object or within the material. It's really useful if you're creating like liquids, so milk, honey. Adding a scatter color for the inner area of your volume can help add to some realism. But seeing as we're kind of on the theme of gradients as well, let's see how we can create a gradient over the top of this. Because the thing is, we're not actually using any base color, so we don't really want to be adding anything in there. So what we will want to do is inside of our transmission color, so if we command click this little dot here, if we command click there, we get transmission color, the input added to our material here. And then what we can do, we can create our gradient. So let's add another ramp. And then let's load a preset. Let's go with the same one. Why not? Let's go with that same gradient we've been using. And then we're going to plug that into our transmission color. Cool. So we now have that gradient over the top. Hey, Ian, how's it going? Ian Robinson has joined the chat, everyone. Yeah, so you've distracted me now. You know I'm not good at this stuff. Yes, so we've added our gradient, we've set up our glass, and we've now added that as our transmission color. So we're now creating our glass, our reflections, and also that gradient. And because this is quite like a bright, saturated gradient, we can see that depth, we're getting a slightly more solid look. And so from here, this is where we can come back into our transmission, and then we can increase the depth that this is going to travel through. So now we've basically desaturated it by increasing that depth. And that might even be a little bit too much. So let's go to 2. Still want some of that nice color. see, I can sit and tweak. Let's go 2.5. Yes, okay, cool. Right, so that's what we have at the moment. And so the other thing, so let's find that render. Where's that render that I made? So this is the kind of thing that we're looking at creating. So again, a slightly different gradient. I went with a more pinky blue on this one. What we can do is you can see we have these ridges. And again, this is going to help just add some variation and some interesting looking reflections and detail to our object. So let's do that. Let's add some of that. So let's come out of our camera and let's get in here so we can really see what's going on. Okay, let's go like that so we can see this in a bit more detail. Okay, cool. So the way that we're going to create these ridges is again by using the tile shader. You're going to be sensing a theme. But what I love is these techniques it's literally using like a ramp node or a tile shader, and we can create really interesting looking results with just a small number of nodes without having to necessarily go crazy, which I like to do as well. But I like the simple stuff as well. So let's grab our tile shader. And then for this, let's grab some lines. And then what I am going to do is I don't want these to be 100% values because I'm going to use this tile shader and this particular sort of line shader to control my displacement. And so I don't really want to be using 100% values. So let's go 90% and then let's go 10%. And let's pull it down. And let's make this smaller again. And then maybe we can make these a little bit bigger, a bit more even. Okay, cool. Yeah, something like that. Cool. So then how do we use this to control our displacement? Well, we need to tell Redshift that this shader now needs to be considered as a displacement map. So we're going to plug that together, and then we're going to plug that into our displacement. And then if we uncheck that, we should then see our ridges. Cool. We can now see we have those really cool looking ridges over the top of there. And the reason that this has worked straight away is I've already got my RS object tag on top of my cloth, and I've already set up my geometry tessellation and displacement, which is here. And if we come out of here, we can see this is pretty much how this was created, just using a slightly different gradient. The lighting's the same, and the material is basically the same. Cool. So let me just have a quick look through any questions just to see. Oh, okay. Okay. I like this. This is a good one. So Tunji was saying, I've noticed when animating an object with a procedural Maxon noise texture applied, the noise moves around. Okay. The reason for this is think of the noise as being a 3D texture in space. And so my favorite way of just talking about this is if I grab a cube and I X-ray the cube, this will make sense, I promise. Okay, so the outer cube, so the X-ray cube, think of that as your 3D noise texture shader. It is 3-dimensional. And then your cube on the inside, think of this as your object. So depending where your object is in that 3D environment of noise, you're going to get a different pattern. And so when you're animating with a noise, the workflow that I go with is I just set up some really quick auto UVs on my object. And then what it will do is it should stick. Another way is you can actually pin a material and then it should pin the noise for you. That is normally the best way. That's the way that works for me, is using the pin material here. But I think some other people have been throwing some ideas in the chat as well. So hopefully you have an answer for that. But yeah, sometimes just doing like a quick auto unwrap is great. But yeah, as we might have a little answer from here. Just having a quick read. Cool. Right. Let's have a quick look through. Okay. Pin. Yep. So William was saying pin material tag for the moving noise texture. Yep. So that can work as well. But yeah, the best way is sometimes to just do an auto unwrap, because once you have your UVs, and then if your material is then using the UV projection, it's not going to move. That's also the case if you're using or working with material stacking and you're using the flat projection and you find that it's moving around. Yeah, UVing is a great way of working. Okay, so quick question here from Bob. How do you render out the glass so you can comp a different background or text behind it in After Effects or Fusion? I did a quick tip on this, and it's a little bit of a hack. So we can render out an AOV pass and have it, let me just find this in here. We can have the refraction affect the alpha. The thing is with this, it's a little bit of a fake way of doing it, because then the refraction isn't going to it's not then going to interact with anything in post, because it's still just a pass. So in Legacy we have where is it? Refraction affects alpha channel. So you can enable that. I did actually do a quick tip on this. So let me just, I can throw that in the chat. Is it not wanting to open? There we go. Right, let me just head over playlists. We should have a Redshift quick tip playlist. Here we go. And yeah, so how to render alpha channel with transparency. So check that out. Again, yeah, it's not like 100% perfect workflow, because yeah, the refraction won't affect anything in post. But it might work. Hopefully it might be what you're after. Okay, cool. So we're getting a little bit, we're getting near to half past the hour. So let's just really quickly, I'm going to go into the wristbands scene, and then we'll have a look at some final questions. But again, it's all kind of the stuff we've just looked at. So let's just dive into here and get my render view open, drop that in there, kick that off. Cool. Right, so again, we have, just really quickly, we have a dome light. I used 2 dome lights for this one. I was greedy. So I got my first dome light, which is again another one of those Studios metal HDR images to create some really nice lighting and reflections. And then I used a secondary dome light with nothing in, just lowered the intensity just to create even more of that nice sort of ambient lighting. I wanted a really bright looking scene. And then I threw in 2 area lights, and this time I actually reduced the spread entirely. And so they are just their solid shapes and spotlights. And I found this just created some really interesting looking reflections and just lighting in the scene. And so if I just switch those on, you can see at the moment, they don't look like much. But when you then combine this with a clear plastic with some smudges and scratches, these really can make the difference between something that looks a little bit standard to then looking a little bit more creative. And then this you won't be able to see yet until I throw on this metal grate material for the floor. This is literally just a plane with an incandescent or an emissive material on, just to create those white holes underneath. Cool. And then we have this type of scene, this type of animation, which I really liked. I was just playing around with some fun ideas and fun techniques whilst looking at lighting and texturing. So let's kick this off and let's dive into this particular material. So again, we're going to open this up and then we're just going to throw this onto our wristbands. And if we come in here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to switch off that weight. We're going to hide our roughness, and then we're going to add some transmission. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that ramp again. So I'm using the same gradient each time for this. So I'm going to load that preset. I'm going to grab that one inside of here. And you're probably thinking it looks a little bit strange. And the reason for this is because these have actually been auto UV unwrapped. And so what that means is I can then do a horizontal mapping type, and it's going to follow the UV tile from left to right. So now we're getting this really nice, interesting looking gradient on here. Maybe we'll pull in the whites a little bit more, and we can just do a little bit of noise. Maybe a little bit less. Yeah, something like that. Cool. And so we're pretty much just using some of the same techniques that we've gone through over the last two scenes. So transmission color, and then we can also do scatter color, because they can work hand in hand quite well. And then let's connect these both to here, and then let's really up that depth. Cool. So we have this nice sort of clear gradient effect. And then from here, so this is where I like to break the rules sometimes. I don't like to follow the rules when it comes to texturing, because we're looking at an abstract gradient here, right? We're not looking at a tileable texture. We're not looking at something that needs to look a particular, it doesn't need to match up. So we don't necessarily have to worry about projection rules. And so sometimes I just come in here and I play with the projections. More often than not, we do this to fix the projection, but sometimes it can be used just to create interesting effects. So if we come in and we can start to play around with the different projections, we can see that we get an interesting result. And I really like cubic. So cubic for me, I just thought looks like pretty cool. And we can have all the different ones that, again, you know, just create like a different look. And it creates a more interesting or a slightly interesting looking projection. Or again, we can keep it on UV mapping if we want to go UV mapping. But yeah, sometimes breaking the rules is okay when you want to just create abstract and creative designs, which in this case we are. So yeah, definitely have a little play with that sometimes. Okay, cool. So from here, what can we do? Well, we've already really combined the two techniques that we looked at, which was creating gradients and also creating that noise effect, and then also creating our transmission color and creating that cool looking glass. But what if we then looked at adding or incorporating some of the common techniques that we normally do when we create materials? For example, smudges. So controlling roughness values and then controlling scratches and things like that. All of those things can really help push your shaders to that next level. And yes, to this, Derek, absolutely. Pirate code. That's what I live by, breaking the rules forever. Cool, yeah. So let's add some scratches and smudges and then take this from a relatively standard looking shader to quite an interesting one, even though it's only going to be using a couple of nodes. So we can actually come into our asset browser and we can search surface imperfections in media, and it's going to give you some really cool looking smudges, scratches, things like that. But I, again, have been sort of diving into some of the GSG stuff, and they have some pretty cool textures, actually. So again, all of this stuff we can still do inside the asset browser. I'm just going to dive into here and grab, let's find a cool one. Let's go smudges. Oh, hey, let's use the last one. Why not? So we're going to grab smudges, and then we're going to grab scratches. We don't want a lot, though. We want like a really minimal one, maybe like that. We don't want like a lot of scratches. Okay, so let's solo our smudges. And let's just fix that remapping. So let's maybe go 4 and 2. See what that looks like. Yeah, looks okay. So smudges, what I'm going to do with this particular smudge texture map is I'm going to use it to control the roughness and add some nice variation. So inside my Redshift standard material, we have a roughness value here. And at the moment it's set to 0. So we have, if I unsolo that, we have some nice glossy, shiny reflections over the top. So a roughness value of 0 gives us no roughness. We get glossiness. A roughness value of a higher value, up to 1, will give us no shininess. We'll have quite a rough looking material. And what we can do is we can use a texture map to control the different roughness values over the surface of our object. And the way this works is, again, if I solo this, so I mean, we don't necessarily need, we've got a little bit of depth of field going on here. Let's switch that off. So the way that this is going to work is anything that is 100% white, so in our case, a lot of this material, is going to be a roughness value of 1. So it's going to be very rough. Anything that is 100% black is going to be a roughness value of 0. Therefore, it's going to be really glossy. The trouble is here, we can see that looking at this texture map, it's going to be creating a lot of roughness because there's a lot of lighter color in it. But the thing is, I want a nice glossy texture, but I do still want to use this texture map. So what I can do is I can actually use a ramp to remap this. So at the moment, we've been using a ramp to just create nice gradients, which is great. It's perfect. It's what it's good for. What we can also do is we can grab a ramp. We can connect it in between our smudges and our standard material, and then we can remap the black and white areas to add more of these darker areas. And so now when I plug that into my reflection roughness, what we have is we now have a lot more of these shiny areas, glossy areas, but still with a little bit of that nice roughness variation inside of here. And then finally, how can we use our scratches? Well, the scratches are going to be creating some surface detail. And so the one of the easiest ways and one of the fastest ways of creating surface detail is by using a bump map. So we're going to tell Redshift this particular scratch map is now to be seen as a bump map. So we connect that together. And then our bump map goes into our bump input here, which is already pre-set up for us, which is handy. We can plug that in. And then a value of 1 might be a little bit too intense. So I also tend to do negative values here. So let's do a negative value of 0.1. And then what we'll have is some nice scratch surface detail over the top of here as well. So this was how I created this particular material. I did an auto unwrap on this on this as well, which I think is in this scene, is in the scene that I sent. So yeah, I just did a very quick auto unwrap. I'm not necessarily going to show it. I won't show it now, but I promise I will show it on something soon, or I'll do a quick tip about it, only because there's a little tiny bug that when I open the UV edit mode and come back to standard, sometimes it will freeze on me, and I don't want that to happen. But in other streams, I've gone through auto unwrapping and creating things like UV mesh layers. So if you do want to know about that, then definitely check out like the Nike balloon text stream that I did. It talks about how you can unwrap and then create a texture inside of Photoshop. And then we can add the material in the same way. So we have this wristband material that I created, which, do I have it on here? Yeah, it looks something a bit like this. So again, threw the gradient on just so everyone could see that. And then let me just throw that on the wristbands. And let's see if this is okay. Yeah. So I don't know if this is necessarily the right material. I've been playing around with these scenes today to upload them on Dropbox for everyone. But yeah, what we can do is we can come in and we can adjust the length of these. So we can make these nice and small. And again, we can have tiling if we want. I left tiling on because I liked the effect of them being tiled and duplicated around. I also added one to the outside as well. This is just the inside one. Is this it? No, that won't be the outside one. And then, yeah, what we can do, same as before, if we don't want it to be tiled, we can come in and we can not have it wrap, or not have it wrap on the V or the U. So yeah. But all of that is also going to be in the project file. So the unwrapped version is in the project file. But yeah, it's a similar technique that we looked at before with applying the material on there. You could use a material blender, or you could do material stacking in this instance, which I did. And Sharon was saying a quick tip would be great on auto unwrapping. Absolutely. Also on that, I think I'm allowed to. I wonder if I'm allowed to say. So next month's I'm going to say it anyway. Next month's DPP is going to be on UVing. And I know this was a hugely requested topic. I get asked about it all the time. The team gets asked about it all the time. And so we are going to be covering UVing inside of Cinema 4D and ZBrush next month. So the events will be on the Maxon events page very soon. But yeah, spoiler, I wasn't sure if it was common knowledge, but it will be soon, and it is now. So yeah, we're covering UVing. Cool. Yeah. So I know we kind of flew through that last project file only because we're sort of getting to the end, and I wanted to have a quick final look at some of the questions. So let me have a quick look. Again, feel free to copy and paste any inside of here. I'm just kind of going to flick up until when I started looking. Okay, so this one here. William was saying, I'd love a more interactive way to scale textures in Redshift. Fiddling with 0.3 scales isn't ideal. Maybe something like native texture scale in the future. So yeah, I completely understand this, and I think the way you have to think of it is like inside of Cinema 4D, obviously the default scaling is in centimeters, and then I believe that's also then the case for Redshift. And so if you're working with really small scale items or values or objects, you therefore need to make sure you're using those small values. If you are, like for me, I'm not working in a real world scale. These things are massive, like these wristbands, I can assure you, are not actual size. So yeah, they're very big. And so the perks of working that way is I don't necessarily have to worry about really small scale values, but pros and cons. But no, I completely understand. It isn't always handy, but yeah, if you're working with small objects, we do need to make sure we pull those things down the exact same way as when we're working in simulation in Cinema 4D. If you're working with really small objects, it's important to come in and make sure you pull your scene scale down. That's another kind of useful thing. So let me have a quick look at some of these. Again, feel free to, copy and paste them. So Sharon was asking, can I do a quick tip on setting up bokeh in the new camera setup? I'm trying to get the camera to not blur out closer to the camera. Okay, so we can quickly talk about that bokeh a little bit. Let me know if this is kind of the thing you're after. So yeah, so bokeh depth of field inside of the new-ish Redshift camera. So here we have, in the optical tab, we have depth of field. And so what I actually did in this case, I had a target object, but let's clear that out. Let's clear it out, why not? And so what we can do is we can define the focus distance or a focus object. So if I choose this little picker here, let's say I want this particular area of this wristband to be in focus. I'm going to just select it in my viewport and nothing will happen. And the reason for that is I haven't controlled my aperture or even enabled bokeh yet. So if I enable that, you can then see that we're getting some blurred edges. If I lower my aperture value, we will get a more intense depth of field. If I pull that down, you'll really see now the things that are really close to really close in comparison to that focus distance, and everything that is really far in comparison to that focus distance will now be a lot less in focus. So I'm trying to have a think about, are you thinking of not having this in focus, or you would like this in focus? Then in that case, that is an interesting one. I wonder. So I haven't played too much with this. I use it. It's really like basic sense. I do a focus distance or focus object. So if I wanted to have the things in focus, maybe we could choose the closer thing that you want in focus and then control the aperture to then maybe bring in some of the other things in detail. So you know what, Sharon, let me find out and let me do a quick tip on that, because that's a great quick tip, because I unfortunately don't know. Yeah, but thanks for the great idea. So yes, stay tuned. I promise I'll add it to my list and I will do a quick tip on that for you and for me. It's mainly for me, really. Cool. So having one quick look. So Scott was saying about UVing being lost. Yes, absolutely. Me too. I'm super excited for that. It's going to be a good one. I'm really excited. So I think, as far as I can see, that was everyone's questions. If I did miss one, then drop it in there again and I can take a look at it. But yeah, just a quick sort of recap. Then in the YouTube bio, there is this link where you get the project files for today. So that cloth basketball, the floating cloth, like glass one, and then the wristbands. So the shaders aren't included, but what I'm going to do is I will do another version with the shaders included. Again, I can't share certain things, but I will replace them with an equivalent version from the asset browser. So you'll have the starting files, which are these ones here, and then by the end of the week, fingers crossed, I will upload a a more final version for you all to break down. And as a quick reminder, you could always head over to the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel, where you can see all the stuff that we have going on, all the upcoming live streams and quick tips and stuff like that. And then if you ever want to see again, sort of like the main page where we have everything on, which includes in-person events as well, then just head over to the maxon.net events page. And so the final question I'm just looking at here. So Helal, unfortunately, I don't know the answer to your question about exporting and using it in a compositing file. However, feel free to email training@maxon.net, and I'm very sure one of the guys will be able to get back to you on that. Really sorry, I do not know the answer to that question. Also, so Vitus, is it possible to get the last tutorials files? Which tutorial are you referring to? Let me know. And hopefully I can direct you to them, or I can upload them. If it's mine, if it's something to do with me, or if it's the team, then I can find out from the team as well. Also, to Mohammed, yes, I have seen your messages about the Maxon internship. So head over to the Maxon website, and we have a careers page where you can contact the team for any kind of jobs going and internships and things like that. So yeah, so Vitus, you're asking about the last tutorials files. If you could let me know which tutorial you are talking about. Also, hey to Thanos, Motion Punk. I'm in Greece next week, believe it or not. I'm now just chatting away with people. So yeah, Vitus, let me know which tutorial you're referring to for the project files, or yeah, drop us an email at training@maxon.net, and I can send you those. That is not a problem at all. Also, hey to Derek, thanks for the lovely message and lovely comments. I really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up because yeah, I've gone a little bit over what I originally planned, but thank you to everyone who was part of this stream. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to download the project files. Anything that I didn't get around to, or any questions, training@maxon.net. Yeah, and hopefully I'll get to see you all on another stream soon. So have a lovely rest of your day. Have a great week, and yeah, I'll see you all soon. Bye everyone.